All right, folks, it's 2:40. I'm going to call the meeting of the Board of Supervisors back to order. We were adjourned for closed session for a while. And this is item number 18 on the agenda. On today's agenda, which time there will be a discussion of public hearing pursuant to Government Code 65090 regarding discussion relative to possible extension of an emergency interim ordinance adopted pursuant to California Government Code 65858, prohibiting applications for certain uses that may conflict with a contemplated general plan update. You'll notice how carefully that was worded without using the M word, because that's been probably the most misunderstood action that this board's taken since I've been around here. And so this is actually a public hearing today, so I need to hear the presentation from staff, after which time I'll open the public hearing. So I'm going to turn this over to the Community Development Agency staff at this time.
Thank you.
Enough out of you.
Stephanie Moreno, Director of Community Development. We've prepared a memo in conjunction with County Counsel's Office relative to the moratorium, which is scheduled to expire December 2nd of 2007. There are copies in the audience. I believe everyone has the ability to pick up a copy. If they haven't already read it, it was on our website as well. There's a legal analysis contained in here, which I'm sure you've all seen, relative to the legal issues relative to the moratorium. There's a staff discussion in which we identified 3 options for the board to take. One is to extend the moratorium by adopting the attached extension of an interim urgency ordinance adopted pursuant to California Government Code Section 65858, prohibiting applications for certain uses that may conflict with a contemplated general plan update until December 2nd of 2008. This would require 4 votes of the board. The second option is to extend the moratorium by adopting the same attached aforementioned document to a date other than December 2nd, which can be shorter than December 2nd but not longer. And the third option, which is the one that the Community Development Agency is recommending, is to allow the moratorium to expire, the urgency ordinance, and instead adopt policy criteria for staff to use as part of the review of all land use development applications submitted after expiration of the existing moratorium, which expires on December 2nd, or any extension thereof, for conformance to the policy guidance in order to determine whether to process the application or recommend denial of the application to the board. This action will require 3 votes of the board. We believe that option 3 is the best option for the board. We have attempted to take the input that we heard from the Board of Supervisors and the public at previous public meetings relative to the direction they are looking to head as we continue the general plan update. We believe that the adoption of policy criteria for future applications would be in the best interest of the county, and we're recommending this option 3. If you decide to take option 3, your motion would be to adopt a policy regarding criteria for discretionary project applications submitted pending completion of the General Plan Update Work Program and associated environmental impact report, which is attached to the packet.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Before I open the public hearing, is there any comments from the board this time? Okay, anybody? Folks, if you wouldn't mind, by the way, I hope that nobody parked. Reminded, I forgot to tell you. Everybody look at the parking sign when they pulled up out here, because, you know, I don't want a SWAT team to come in here and remove half of you. Okay, thank you very much. At this time, anyone who feels they may offer testimony or comments today, all at one time during the public hearing, so I would like you all to stand and be sworn in by the clerk at this time. Anybody who feel they may want to offer any testimony, to try to make your comments concise, brief, and not redundant. If somebody's already made a point quite clearly, that should be good enough. I brought my little 21st century timing device here, and it's not like the hook's going to come out or anything, but close to it. I'd like you to hold your comments to 5 minutes when you can. I'd really appreciate it, and so would everybody else. So we'll start this off with non-discrimination. The first person who would like to come up and address the board is welcome to do so at this time.
The sign-in sheet for speakers is here at the end of this table. If you could sign in before you go to the podium.
Close the meeting. Public comment.
No public comment. Meeting's adjourned, yeah. Yeah, I didn't realize that was down there. I would have announced it, but...
You're on.
I guess so. Hi, my name is Joseph Pacelli. I have an office,
Joseph
Pacelli, Bechelli.
Thank you.
I've spoken to you before about Cosgrove Creek, which is now Cosgrove Lake, but we'll get back to that some other day. As you may or may not know, I've been here a couple of years, 2.5 years actually, so I guess I'm a newcomer. And as I've tried to get to know the situation and the people around here, I heard about the groups supporting the Smart Growth Plan. I recently received an email from them telling me how bad this the Stephanie Moreno idea was. They didn't use your name. I think they call you the CDA because it's interpreted as being something that will allow too much growth or any growth at all. Smart growth was the term that I'd heard used in the beginning. I think who can disagree with that? Smart growth would be great. But now we find ourselves with the M word. I didn't hear who it was. It was Supervisor Claudino used that term. It's an extremely important notion because the M word, the moratorium, has in fact just broadcast to the world that we're out there for no growth at all. Whether that's true or not isn't important. It's the perception, I think. If you do nothing else today, I hope you get rid of that word. It's just given the entire world, anybody who wants to move here, anybody who wants to bring economy into this county, it's been given the notion that Calaveras County is just death on wheels. I'm not going to drag this out. I just would ask you to do whatever you can to make this process make sense. I see we have a 28-month process, and to continue to restrict growth as we have with the moratorium, it just doesn't make any sense. Please make it make sense. Do adapt to all the input everyone has given you, and I hope you don't renew the M word. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Colleen Platt, myvalleysprings.com, and member of the Calaveras Planning Coalition. As stated in the General Plan Update Preliminary Baseline Report, quote, the General Plan affects the welfare of current and future generations. This Board of Supervisors wisely enacted the urgency ordinance in December 2006 to protect the public safety, health, and welfare while the Calaveras County General Plan was being updated. I quote, it is the intent of the Board of Supervisors to prohibit acceptance of certain applications as set forth in this ordinance during the terms of the ordinance and any extensions thereof until the General Plan update is complete. Because the public health, safety, and welfare is at least as important and as threatened today as it was a year ago, we find it difficult to understand why the county would recommend letting the ordinance expire at this point in the General Plan update. We have just started taking our first baby steps in the update process. We have not yet learned to walk, much less decided which path we want to walk down. The county is 8 months into this projected 28-month process. There has been no comprehensive review yet of goals or policies. This is scheduled for 2008. Policies are based on goals and objectives. These, in turn, are based on existing conditions and projected needs. We have not yet determined our existing conditions and projected needs. We should not be moving forward with policy decisions when there are no existing planning and land use maps that accurately show current land use and already approved development. The baseline report maps do not do this. Our general plan land use element does not contain adequate population density standards, nor does it contain geographic projections of future populations or economic activity. How can we create a clear policy of land use conversion when we don't have a good idea of our existing situation or a clear direction for growth? Opening the door to new land conversion in this stage of the general plan update doesn't make sense and would be against the best interests of the citizens of the county. We already have thousands of approved buildable lots in the county. In the Greater Valley Springs area alone, there are over 500 new subdivision lots approved and ready to build on. Plus, there's another 3,000 or so new subdivision lots going through the application and review process. We have no shortage of lots. Any slowdown in building is due to the economy and the national housing slump, not the urgency ordinance. The staff report the board adopted on November 6th stated that the urgency ordinance did not affect applications for subdivision maps or building permits. And, quote, there has been no substantive change in the amount of commercial building permits issued. The planning department continues to process dozens of general plan and zoning amendments submitted before December 2006. We need to focus our county staff resources on finishing the general plan update, not on processing new unnecessary project applications. Please do the right thing and extend the urgency ordinance for one more year until we have new, clear, long-term general plan goals and policies in place. Thank you.
Thank you, Colleen.
My name is Penny Sarvis, S-A-R-V-I-S. I would agree that we want to get rid of the word moratorium, but I would encourage you to keep the urgency ordinance. It doesn't seem that the conditions that led to the urgency ordinance in the first place have changed. And I'm thinking particularly that the main deficiency that seems to exist is that there is no overall picture of development in the county. State law requires that any given project receive a cumulative effects analysis, an analysis of its impact on the whole picture of what is already in place and what else is planned. But there is no whole picture. There has not been a whole picture, and there is not now. I'm going to quote from an article in last week's Stockton Record. Members of the Calaveras County Board of Supervisors have groused for years about the fact that planners keep asking them to approve projects without assessing the cumulative effects of new projects on things like roads and wildlife habitat. Staffers have said they were unable to calculate the cumulative effect of developments because they lacked an accurate baseline showing exactly how much open land had already been converted to housing and businesses. So it is currently impossible in this county to determine what the impact of any given development will be. And what we in the public have been told is that the accurate baseline information has not been assembled because the planning department has had no time. If the planning department and the community development agency find themselves now with more time available, it seems the last thing they should do is go back to processing more development proposals in an uninformed and inadequate way. If time is indeed available, it should be spent putting together the cumulative picture of what's happening in the county. That would put the county in a position, finally, to assess each proposal in an informed and intelligent way. It would place each proposal in a whole picture that is comprehensive. Not long ago, Supervisor Tryon said that the county has to stop looking at each individual proposal as its own universe and start evaluating it in terms of the whole context around it. Until the whole context is known, neither the planning department, nor the planning commissioners, nor the supervisors, nor the public can make good decisions about development. This is not the time to lift the urgency ordinance and to encourage more development proposals. It is the time to do the homework that has never been done. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Pat Gutman, and I am a resident of McCollum Hill and a representative of the Calaveras Planning Coalition. I urge the board to extend the urgency ordinance. It is my view that the planning department has its hands full implementing the new general plan. It is good policy to have a general plan in place that is not flawed before approving new development. The planning department, with its limited personnel and resources, needs to focus on implementing the new general plan before approving new projects. Otherwise, the timeline will be extended for completion of the new general plan because planning is spending its time focusing on new projects. Let's put our limited resources to their best use. Thank you.
This was the same as you emailed us, Tom? Yes.
Good afternoon. My name is Tom Infacino, and I'm facilitator for the Calaveras Planning Coalition. As you know, the coalition is composed of community groups, organizations, and individuals interested in growth and planning issues in Calaveras County. For a number of reasons, the coalition supports extending the urgency ordinance for a year and supports adding further provisions to help the county process development proposals in a way that promotes the public interest and conforms to the guidance and requirements of state law. First, the coalition supports extending the urgency ordinance because the original reasons used to justify the existing urgency ordinance are still valid. When adopting the current urgency ordinance, the board made specific findings of fact that justified the ordinance. These included, 1, that the Calaveras County General Plan was in need of an update. 2, that such a comprehensive review of policies governing development is appropriate prior to the new development taking place. 3, that piecemeal review of development applications is contrary to the public welfare and threatens the viability and long-range success of the general plan update. And 4th, that continuing to accept the applications for development entitlements while the county is updating the general plan would preclude the county from applying updated land use policies to the proposed developments, continue to justify extension of the urgency ordinance for another year. Second, the coalition supports extending the urgency ordinance because there is a surplus of existing legal lots available for development in Calaveras County. The Calaveras County currently has over 17,000 unimproved legal parcels in a broad variety of land use designations. As Colleen mentioned, the staff report from County Counsel's office noted that residential and commercial development of these lots has continued despite the existence of the urgency ordinance. Thus, while carelessly creating new lots does pose threats to health and safety and well-being, limiting the type of new development applications through the urgency ordinance is not precluding economic and residential development. The third reason the board should consider extending the urgency ordinance is to help the development department focus on alleviating the real barriers to future development. For example, many have acknowledged the need to perfect area of origin water rights to serve future development in Calaveras County. Such rights cannot be lawfully secured in the absence of an adopted general plan update that justifies the need for the water. Thus, to secure those water rights, we need county planning to focus more of its efforts on adoption of the general plan. 2, funding in addition to existing development fees is needed for wastewater treatment, regional transportation, and law enforcement. County planning needs to work in cooperation with other agencies to secure that funding so that these real barriers to smart growth can be overcome. 3, the county continues to fail to meet targets for workforce housing. County planning needs to work in cooperation with nonprofit organizations in the state to implement an effective workforce housing program to facilitate smart growth of our economy and to more equitably distribute the fruits of liberty. Having the Development Department staff focus on these priorities would be far more effective in promoting smart growth now than would be the use of limited staff time on the continued expansion of the already huge surplus of parcels available for development. In addition to the current urgency ordinance, the Coalition notes that state law justifies placing additional conditions on new development proposals. In April of this year, the Coalition presented the Board with the proposals to limit the processing of approval of projects that have a nexus to flaws in the current general plan and that foreclose future planning options in specific communities or in the county as a whole. We encourage the Board to adopt these further provisions of the urgency ordinance or as planning department policy. Finally, in addition to extending the current urgency ordinance, the Board should consider pragmatic limitations on interim development approvals to reduce the adverse effects of the flawed general plan. For example, many new applications may not get final approval until after adoption of the new general plan. To avoid applicants getting a free pass on compliance with the new general plan, you could require projects in any and all new development applications to conform to the policies and implementations of the general plan in place, standards in place, at the time those projects are approved. Similarly, for projects converting working landscape and open space designations to residential designations, you could require a finding of fact indicating that there is a shortage of land in that residential designation in the county. You could require additional road impact fees to mitigate impacts on law enforcement and jail capacity, and you could require minimum workforce housing provisions. Continuing to approve development in the absence of such requirements merely exacerbates the existing deficiencies we're currently experiencing. We must stop digging that hole deeper. In conclusion, I would like to say that I love the Christmas season we're entering now. I love the caroling and the food. I love the lights and the ornaments and the food. And more than the food, I love the themes of the Christmas season. Rebirth, new life, salvation, flowing from the humblest of places. Those gifts are promised to people who will live in faith and who will use the blessing of God's strength to live life at a higher standard. In the days and months that have passed since the beginning of the general plan update process, many have grown weary and lost faith in the county's ability to fairly update the general plan. To you I say, now is the time for faith. During this general plan update process, both citizens, private citizens, and county staff have complained that they are being held accountable to perform at a higher standard. And to you I say, do not curse the standard, but use the strength that is within you to meet the standard and to rise above it. There is a hero in each one of you, a hero that keeps you honest, a hero that makes you noble, a hero that will give you the strength that you need. When we have that faith, and when we summon that strength to meet those higher standards, from this humble place we call Calaveras, we will be blessed with new life. Thank you, God bless you, and God bless the good people of Calaveras County.
Good afternoon. I'm Bill Schmidt from Mountain Ranch. When this ordinance was first adopted, I believe the number of applications that were pending or whatever was somewhere over 200, probably 250. There was lots of numbers thrown out. I don't think at this current time there's any less applications that are currently pending. We were sold bill of goods. Well, this is only temporary. It's only going to last a little bit, maybe 6 or 8 months. We'll be able to catch up and be on our way. You have the same number of planners on staff now as you did in 2003, plus you have a general plan coordinator. I don't see much opportunity for things to have gotten any better. I have an application in with the county to do a simple 3-lot split. Applied in March of 2007. After 30 days, any application that's isn't acted on is deemed complete. As of a week or two ago, there's been no planner assigned to my project. So I'm thinking that any application, if you open this up, any application you take now is going to end up being at the end of this moratorium period anyway before it gets acted on. So why not just keep this moratorium going? Let's clear the decks before we start getting anything else going. I think option 3 in your packet allows too much discretion gives the planning department too much discretion to decide which is good and which is bad and the various reasons. And given that the general plan update process is not that far along, as the ordinance is written, you just don't have enough information to be able to say this is going to be in compliance or non-compliance with a future general plan. So I really urge you, let's just keep this thing going. It makes sense. We haven't cleared the decks. We haven't gotten to a point at which things are getting acted on in a timely enough fashion, at least as far as I'm concerned. And I have 2 other things. I like to hear the Valley Springs people tell us how many lots are available to be developed, but and they're mostly in their neck of the woods. But those of us in the rest of the county still have our lives to live, and we'd still like to be able to do what we need to do in our area. So we're not really a part of all those giant developments that are down there. And lastly, on a personal note, I have a $50 bet that this moratorium is going all the way to the 2-year period. And that's probably incentive enough for you to vote for.
Actually, quite the contrary, Bill.
Bill, is it too late to get in and place money on that?
I'm starting to give odds.
Good afternoon, Board. I'm Addie Jacobson from Murphy's, and I guess maybe today I'm representing CAP. I don't have a bet on this, so, I just hope you do the right thing for the right reasons, and I won't make any money either way. I think, having looked at this, I support what a lot of other people have said, that I think legally you probably have to extend this. I can't see how you could be allowing general plan amendments on a flawed general plan, or limiting what can happen in the new general plan by decisions that have been made. So, that seems to me to make a lot of sense. I just wanted to say that the thing that struck me as I was coming down the hill and picked up my Union Democrat from my mailbox on the way down, lead article says county wells are going dry, and it's an article about Jenny Lind and water going down, and quotes Ed Pattison from CCWD saying that a lot of wells in the western part of the county are going dry and that they need more data, and he was asking for grant money to do some groundwater monitoring. And I know I've heard all of you say before that being sure that we can assure infrastructure to development is a really big thing, and right now we're having trouble in some parts of our county providing infrastructure to the people who already live here. So just from sort of a citizen's point of view, that's to me another reason to think about holding back until we get a lot more data and understand what's happening in our county. So thank you very much.
We have needs in our community already. We have roads that need to be widened. I've been fighting a real problem here in San Andreas, trying to get sewer capacity. Who's going to pay for that? If development doesn't pay for it, it's going to fall on the people who already live here. There are going to be new taxes that are going to be put in place to help bring some of these utilities into compliance, and that burden is going to fall on all of us that already live here. So, growth isn't a bad thing. It's going to happen no matter what. We're going to have new kids. We need them. There's not a lot of people I see in this room, and it should be interesting to know how many people in this room actually have kids still living at home. A few of them, yeah. And it'd be nice to know that they have a place to stay, that they could stay where they were born, they could stay where they've been raised, get a job here. We'd like to have parks. It would be nice to do that. Who's going to pay for it? Usually it's developers, and developers are involved with smart planning and smart growth. I hear words about rampant unplanned growth, careless approval of projects. Dear God, have you been through the process? Has anybody here? This group's tough. They're not easy to get something passed. Mark my words, I've been trying since December 2003 to put a retirement community in here, and it's not done yet. So I really would take exception to the words rampant unplanned growth. I don't think it exists here. I do encourage you to take away the word moratorium. I do agree with Stephanie's and staff's recommendation. It would be nice to move forward. I think you guys have done a great job of starting the plan for the new general plan update. A general plan constantly needs to be updated, and we've let it sit for a little while, but there's a big investment and commitment from this county to move forward and get it done, and I think that's a strong commitment, and it shows that we're going in the right direction.
My name is Kathy Batchelor, and I am from Arnold. I'm pleased that some of the people who have gotten up here are supporting the number 3 plan of Stephanie's recommendation. I know that there's a lot of unrest, I guess you would say, as far as this county is concerned. I heard a statement today that we need a higher standard of living, as opposed to what? A standard of living for those of us that can't earn a living here right now? The best interests of the people of the county would be to keep them employed. There are tons of jobs out there that are not able to be filled because contractors cannot get a permit, because we can't sell some of those thousands of lots that they say that we have here. There are some of those lots that are unbuildable, and it's becoming more and more apparent. People are being denied permits for certain reasons. I don't know if this whole group that just showed up today is even looking at the number of foreclosures in this county, because people are not earning a living. Something has to keep going. A little bit at a time is better than nothing for these people that have to pay their bills. They have mortgages, some of them that can still do it. They have taxes to pay, which is going to help this county if they can continue to pay them. And you can't blame the general public for a general plan that is not in place right now. It hasn't been kept up, but it's not all of their fault, and they shouldn't be the ones that we are making pay for it. Every time someone wants to do something, there's a different mitigation they need to deal with. We have oak tree mitigations, habitat conservancy, RIM fees, school fees, sewer fees, and most of those costs are being given to the developers, and I'm not objecting to that, to tell you the truth. Actually, at one meeting in Arnold, I said, you know what? I've been using these roads for 20 years, and nobody's put a tax on me for all the use that I have used. And I think in some cases we all should pay. But on the same note, the property tax keeps getting made larger and larger. And it only goes to the people who own property, not to all of those who don't own property, but would like to someday if they could afford it. So there's lots of things that all of us have to take a look at, but not everybody in this county has a regular paycheck, And it depends on whether or not the contractors are working, whether or not the realtors are able to sell property, whether or not the title companies can work, the excavators, the septic people, the engineers. It's not a shortage of any one job, but a multitude of jobs that can't continue if nothing's going to be approved. And I agree with Dave. There are a lot of people here who would not say that this has been rampant growth. They've done an excellent job in what we would call, some of us would call, smart growth in trying to control that. So I would urge you, please, to adopt number 3 as recommended by Stephanie and the Community Development Group.
Are there any other members of the public that would like to address the board on this issue? Okay. Stephanie, did you need to respond to any of the comments that were made?
No, generally speaking, I think we've addressed them in previous workshops as far as the moratorium itself and what effect it's had. I think that we've tried to develop policies that address most of the concerns that we heard. I think that this is a step in the right direction for this county to go, unprecedented to take it to this level of review as we do the general plan update. I would like to hear what the board has to say about the individual policies in case there's any adjustments that you would like us to make in them as we propose them. I would like to notify you, I probably should have done this earlier, but we did have a new planner start this week, so we now have filled one of the 3 positions. So
you had a new planner start this week?
New planner start this week.
Oh, great.
So.
What have they done?
She's already processed 3 permits now.
Okay. If there's no further testimony, I'm going to close the public hearing at this time and bring it back to the Board of Supervisors for discussion and possible action. Taking comments now from the board. We'll start, I don't know, Russ, did you want to?
Sure. Okay, I just want some, share some clarifications here with us all. First of all, I want to acknowledge and thank the people that came forward to talk. I know sometimes you may feel like that we aren't listening to you. My own personal feeling is that the proposal here that the CDA has come up with is a clear demonstration that we all have listened to the appeals of the people over the last year to come up with policies that are meaningful and will prevent some bad things from happening and maybe encourage some good things to happen. But getting to the specifics of this, if we were to adopt the first 2 options, it's obvious it would be kind of business as usual for the next year. Under the 3rd option, which, by the way, I'm leaning toward favoring myself, any project that has that's currently what I would call in the pipeline, can you explain to us how that would be affected?
Those projects would continue in their review. We would most likely want to contact the individual project applicants and talk to them about where it appears that we may be headed with the general plan update, encourage them to maybe look at their projects relative to those policies, but they have a right to proceed under the current policies in place, and they would be continued to be allowed to process up until the point that they would be scheduled for the Planning Commission.
Okay, we adopted this urgency ordinance back in December of last year.
Yes.
And I have knowledge of certain projects that came in shortly after that it didn't kind of get in under the wire before the adoption of the ordinance, but say January, February, and I think Bill Schmidt mentioned he had one that came in March, that they haven't been assigned a planner yet. So they're essentially, I mean, they may be moving. Somebody used the word glacial speed at a meeting here recently. That it's not exactly at glacial speed, but the thing that I'm trying to demonstrate here is that whatever decision that we make here today, it won't have an explosive effect on what happens in January. I mean, so I just want to make that clear that if the decisions that we make today will impose a slightly modified criteria for projects to come in, it's certainly not going back to the way we did it before. In my view, it's very much of a leap forward toward a better general plan in the future. We're trying to anticipate the things that may be embedded in the general plan at some point in the future. So
that's absolutely right.
But I want to, at the risk of being beating this thing to death, is that an application that would come in on January 10th, in all likelihood, unless we hire a lot more planners, it wouldn't progress through the system so quickly that it would actually come to fruition or get before the Planning Commission or the board for perhaps a year or more, and we'll be very much farther along the process of developing the general plan, so that we know for certain what it's going to look like and feel like and taste like.
That is correct.
Okay. I think that I want to emphasize that we've heard a lot of references to smart growth principles, although these particular 3 or 4 levels of criteria or characteristics that we'd like to see these projects have if they get before us, they certainly, by virtue of the fact that we are requiring them or suggesting strongly that any proposal to do a zone change or a general plan amendment would require its being served by sewer and water. And I mean that's a very, very significant step. I think that's never happened before, right?
That is correct.
Okay. And under the smart growth principles, it talks about we want to have direct development towards existing communities. Well, by virtue of the fact that we're putting this as a criteria that it be served by sewer and water, where are the facilities? They're in the existing community. So that's a do not overlook the fact that reality is embedded in this option. Am I over my 5 minutes?
You're a supervisor.
You're doing just fine, Russ.
Okay, I can have 6.
My watch has stopped.
What I'm a little concerned about, and I haven't had a chance to verbalize this yet, but we have at various places in the county areas that are actually zoned for like smaller parcels, 40-acre parcels or 20-acre parcels. People have owned these lands for quite some time, and who knows, maybe for family estate planning purposes and stuff, that they have a full expectation that they would like to come forward and exercise their privilege of making an application. I'm by no means advocating that we carte blanche approve every application that we get, but I'm a little concerned that we would go from or impose this 40-acre minimum rule on an area that has been zoned for years for 20-acre parcels. They might have 200 or 300-acre parcels there now, but I know some of these families, and they have for a long time regarded that probability or the feasibility of making smaller subdivision on their lands as being their retirement, and I don't think that there's anything necessarily bad about that. So I'd like to hear some other people weigh in on whether the 40-acre threshold is the appropriate one. I'm suggesting in my own mind that that would be like a very severe and sudden downzoning for a lot of people. That we really haven't had a chance to talk about that. But anyway, I'm very much in favor of this option 3 at this point. Thank you.
Thank you, Russ. And Rita, do you have comments at this time?
Yeah, I have a couple questions, please. By adopting option 3 and a project comes in, they want to do parcel splits, and we haven't gone through the general plan process of what the respective communities or the county as a whole wants, increasing density, how would that impact density? So, I mean, an example could be similar to the one we had this morning, and that was just going from rural to commercial, and I mean, that's off the books, but let's say someone comes in with a project and they want 20, 40, 200 units, you're increasing the density, and we haven't gotten to the density portion of the general plan on land use. What does this do to those projects that might come in?
We would still consider those projects as we do now. If they meet the criteria specified in the board's policy, if they adopt option 3, it doesn't address density. It addresses where it's located and what kind of services are provided to it. So they would have an option to continue with that project as long as they meet those policy directions. We, of course, keep track of where the general plan is going. We're taking comments in from the communities on various issues. And if we think that there's a red flag there that is in opposition to something we've already heard, we would probably come up to the board for some direction if it's excessive in its nature. In our experience, most of the larger projects are going to be under these policies closer to where there's higher density anyway. And they probably would not be asking for more than would be allowed under the current general plan designation, given the fact that they're going to be on water and sewer. It goes up to 6 to 12 per acre, which is pretty high density. So we think that that would be, it would be an occasional application we may see like that, and we may come to the board for direction on it, but we're not anticipating those types of applications.
Okay, so we have a project, comes in, it can give us, it can go on water and sewer. How do we then deal with the circulation portion of that, assuming that the moratorium is off, and that's within the next year?
The roads have to be built to county standards, and part of what we look at on road issues now are circulation, on how people get in and out, not just for health and safety reasons, but for connectivity reasons and for transit reasons. So all of those things would still be looked at in the scope of the project as we move forward with it.
Okay. Can we reinstitute the moratorium? Well, if we decide to take option 3, and we don't extend it for another year, and we decide in 4 months this isn't working, can we reinstitute it for one more year?
No, you can only re-adopt or adopt a new urgency ordinance based on different reasons.
Okay, but if we would have that option if we came up with some good enough reasons, right?
Is that right, Janice? You'd have to initiate a new one.
You would have to initiate and go through the additional process, yes.
Okay, would that be just a 1 year, or would that be, again, like we did before, 45 days?
If it's a new urgency ordinance based on different reasons, it goes through the same process. You have 45 days plus 1 year plus 1 year.
Okay, got it. Okay, thank you. That's it for right now.
On a 4/5 vote.
All right. Steve?
I had a question and then some comments. I understood that the Community Development Agency was looking at the policy, the recommended policy and language on it, and was considering some minor additions to that. Is that the case, and is that that's not before us exactly, but did you have other recommendations?
On our policies here?
Yes.
That we've adopted? One of the concerns I heard that we had neglected to address was about affordable housing. And we're certainly not opposed to adding language in here to, not to require it, because not every project would be suitable for that purpose, but to encourage applicants to take a look at the housing element and to see what a wide variety of options we have in there, mechanisms for providing affordable housing options. We do that with each application now on a case-by-case, but that is one issue that was not addressed and that I heard some concerns about.
Do you have language to recommend in that regard?
We could add a sentence that would encourage the use by an applicant of affordable housing implementation measures or mechanisms, or however you wanted to phrase that, and then what we would do is review the project for that. I would suggest you use the word encourage, because again, affordable housing is not an appropriate requirement for every single project. If you have a 3-lot split, that may not be, you're not going to want them to donate a lot, so to speak. If you have a 1,000-lot subdivision, obviously it's something that you want to consider. But there are other mitigations in the housing element other than just provision of housing. And so if you were to do something that would encourage the look at it with an actual requirement, I think that that would be a good way to proceed.
Okay. Is this time for board comment all the way around?
Yeah, you don't have to expend all your bullets right here if you don't want to, Steve.
I'd rather, actually.
Okay. In that case, just kidding.
This is an interesting part of our evolution as a county, where we have two different directions to consider today, and the question is which best protects the public interest, deals with the issues that were first raised by our discussions of the original moratorium, and what's been the effect of how do we evaluate the effects of this moratorium? Is it something that has worked? Has it solved some of the issues that have been so preeminent in the discussions that we've had in the planning process? I was most impressed at the onset of the planning process by a number of land use principles that were proposed. First, I think it came out of several different community organizations and was passed by a number of towns in my district. Those land use principles included the idea that we shouldn't build where there's no water, that we shouldn't build where there's no transportation system, and that we shouldn't build where we can't put our sewage somewhere safe and reasonably away from other people's water supply. We also studied carefully the situation with our open space element and found that we had some things to be desired in that regard with our current general plan, and some land use principles talked about that. We also talked about the need to, as we do build residences, find places for the people who need jobs. Jobs are not only made by building homes. There's a question about where people are going to live, that are going to mow the lawns in the suburbs, are going to do the work of fixing people's cars, teaching people's kids, policing the streets, etc. What I find in the moratorium that we've had is that none of those things have been addressed. In fact, one of the things that was most important was the cessation of sprawl that has no sense to it, that stretches infrastructure rather than is based upon it. And so when we got to the visioning meeting that we had not too long ago, and the board, as we moved down this row, each stood up and said, we think that we're ready to commit to some of these land use principles, that we want to not build where there isn't water. Well, that's a revelation in this county. We want to not build where the roads can't handle it. That's progress. And we all said that we thought that it was going to be important to get off the notion that we can sink enough septic systems into limestone fissures and draw water out of it and still stay safe. And we had 5 of us make that commitment on that visioning moment. And that really was vision, and it really was leadership. And the question is, what do we do at this moment? What's the step we can take? Is it to continue a moratorium that looks to me more like a sieve than the catch basin? In my district, our problem is really that we are sinking our wells and our septics into the same fissures, and that we are developing, even under this moratorium, we still have literally thousands of places that people are going to build and continue to build. Doesn't it make sense to move from that moment of pause, catching our breath, to having come to some kind of conclusion that there are some principles that we should begin to act upon and arm our community development agency with the capacity to do something about them? So as I look at, and believe me, I'm reading every email I get, and I know that's unusual too, but I'm working on it. And I recognize that none of this, whether we have a moratorium on moving outside of our general plan, on exceptions to that, or not, we continue. Every project has to meet the test. There's legal requirements about dealing with, do we have the basis within our existing general plan to approve a project or not? And we may yet have differences about that, but if we are committed on the question of infrastructure, we've taken a good 80% of this county and determined that we're going to maintain for this year some kind of rural basis for our lives in much of this county. Are there differences regionally in how this policy would affect different areas? The answer is yes. And there are places where it improves the circumstances almost exponentially, and places where there will be projects that might not have been considered under the moratorium. But if we hold these land use principles, that are contained in this proposal, this policy, and if you hold this board to its words in the visioning process, I believe that is a mechanism that we could make a lot more progress than what has happened under this moratorium, which, by the way, does have the downside effect of, at least in terms of how people perceive this county, discourage some of the very things that would be nice to attract. Favored the idea of a functional economy, not a colonial one relating to shopping and working in other places. And I think it's important that that be part of our planning for our own safety and well-being. I do also feel it's very important to include family splits in this. And that's a big deal where I live. People want to stay in their places. They want their kids to stay in their places. They want their grandkids to stay. And so I applaud the one split opportunity that's contained within this, because it is at least recognizing the family lives that are so important to many multi-generational and even new arrivals. I'm disappointed, and I think that the failure of this moratorium, or at least the partial failure of this moratorium, is evidenced by the very thing that Bill Schmidt raised to suggest a continuance. If we started with 250 projects, and at the end of over a year, we've got 230, that apparently didn't free up staff to stop dealing with short-term arrangements. It didn't happen. And so the idea that if we continue that strategy more, that somehow we will be freeing up staff for long-term arrangements, I'm not sure it's really accomplishing the goal. I voted for it in large measure because I thought that a good portion of our staff would then begin devoting itself to getting the general plan right. Frankly, that was not an outcome of this particular form of moratorium, and it's a piece of my disappointment in it. When Scott Burr says just because something's out there, it doesn't mean it fits the purpose, I agree. That the role of leadership is to convey what's appropriate, what's safe, what's in the public interest. And I think that those land use principles that tie our plans to infrastructure is at least one step in the right direction for this county. It's certainly a step that we haven't practiced very well over the last number of years. I've certainly used more than my 5 minutes. I thank you and concede whatever might be left to the gentleman to my right.
You have all the time you want, Steve.
Are you speaking to Steve or myself?
Both of you. Both. All the time you want.
Are you going to me next, Bill?
Yes, please.
Okay. First, let me say that I do am very much in favor of option 3, which is to allow the moratorium to expire and instead adopt policy criteria for staff to use as part of the review of all land use development applications. So I'm strongly in favor of that. Quite frankly, I think the moratorium has served its purpose, and it's time to move on beyond the moratorium as outlined in the recommendations by staff. So I will now go to staff's recommendations, and staff's recommendations are that basically we prioritize the projects as they come in, and that all projects will not be viewed equally, although they will all be accepted and they will all be reviewed. But all projects and all things in the universe are not equal. And staff is basically saying that they wish the Board of Supervisors, and I say staff, I think staff did this with a lot of direction from the Board of Supervisors, but this is staff's recommendation that the Board of Supervisors will basically favor discretionary project applications that provide the following. And the first is that all divisions of land, and we're talking land divisions here, not parcels that are currently in existence, that all land divisions will be served by public surface water and public sewer. And I have been a strong advocate of public water, public sewer, and county roads to county standards for probably 15 years now. And I think the time has come to put a lot more teeth in that. So I am very much in favor of that. I would say that my definition of public surface water is public appropriated by water right surface water, so that if we're going to build houses, we don't have to worry about a prior water right taking the water away. We still have to worry about Mother Nature and whether it'll rain and fill the reservoirs and that sort of thing. And then it goes on to say, with the exception of parcels that are created that are in excess of 40 acres. I am concerned about that. Quite frankly, I think the parcel size should be larger. I think 40 acres comes from sort of an historical, if you're outside the community plan, well, we're going to do 40 acres because we want to preserve our rural character. I think the parcel size, quite frankly, should be determined upon future development. In other words, if you're going to have future development and the parcel is going to be developed, it needs to be of a significant size that it will have enough parcels, developable parcels, that it can sustain the cost of bringing sewer and water lines to the parcel, sustain the cost of expanding the sewer and water treatment capacities, and sustain the cost of bringing a county road upgraded to county standards to the parcel. So to me, you have to have a certain size development in which to do that. I think the parcel size should incorporate the potential for development, so that when it does development, it can do that. You cannot do that if you're going to have a 40-acre parcel and do eight 5-acre parcel splits, and you're going to create 5 parcels for homes. That's not going to be enough to sustain bringing sewer and water and maintaining county roads and doing sewer and water treatment capacity. So if we say that we are going to, and I hope we do, stick to our guns and say we want future parcel splits to be serviced, and we want a will-serve letter to do sewer and water, then the parcels have to be of a significant enough size so when those parcels develop that they can sustain the infrastructure cost of bringing infrastructure to them. And I worry that 40 acres is too small. And I think that parcel size is probably different in different parts of the county. It'll depend on topography. It'll depend on buildable parcels or buildable lots. At one end of the county on level rolling ground, you'll have a different parcel size than you will in more elevated. But I think elevated or more varied topography, depending on elevation and creeks and the like. So I would like to see something like 60 acres, and then I think when we do the general plan, I think we really need to get some development experts in and tell us, how many parcels it takes to provide for expansion services, and then we need to make sure that the parcels, when they want to break up something big, that they don't break it up to a size smaller than what can be developed by a developer and extend infrastructure. I do support Steve on his, the other exception is only one additional parcel. You can break a parcel down once so that one additional parcel is being created. I think that's important to Steve up in his area. But I hope we don't end up, and I don't think we will because the general plan will catch it before it happens. I don't want to, we used to have 4x4 splits that went on endlessly. You can't split it more than 4 times under one ownership, so one ownership sells it to their kid and he splits it 4 times, and then the kid splits it 4 times, and then they sell it to the sister and they split it 4 times. Well, we can just do 2x2x2x2. But, if we're talking a year or two, then I don't think that's a big problem. My preference would be, if you're going to do that, to put an X or something on the 2 parcels where it can't be split again until we get the general plan adopted. On item 2, let me then go to item 3, and I'll come back to item 2 on the recommendation. Item 3 is provide on-site roads built to the standards set forth in the county road ordinance. I'm totally in favor of that. Including provisions for maintenance of roads that are not accepted into the county maintained system. I'm in favor of that. I think the road ordinance says that these roads will have to be offered for dedication. If the road ordinance doesn't, then we better put that in. But I think the road ordinance does that. So the one I take exception with, and I'll probably take exception with Steve's recommendation for an addition, because I think this should be very simple, and it should be, well, let me go over the one I disagree with. It says cluster density with protection of on-site open space and habitat. And Steve wants to add something, I believe, that deals with affordable housing. I think what we should have in here are things that are discretionary to the Board of Supervisors, not something that's just a reiteration of state law. Protection of on-site open space and habitat is part of CEQA law. It will kick in when the CEQA review is required. The same with affordable housing. We have a housing element that was recently approved that has affordable housing criteria within it. So when a developer comes in, they have to meet the requirements of the housing element. So I don't see any reason to start listing a whole bunch of things here that are basically state law. Anyway, I think what we should have here are things that are discretionary to the Board of Supervisors. And sewer, the requirement of sewer, water, and the standard of county roads, 2 parcels, is very discretionary to the board, and I think we should leave it at that. I think item 2 should not be included in the resolution. So that completes my comments, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Rita, did you have further?
Yeah. I really should just sort of voice my thoughts on where I'm going on this. I do have one more question. We're starting our visioning meetings and public input, and by the middle of January, the latest, or end of December, we'll have some thoughts from the public. Are we going to be able, or we need to modify the resolution to put some of that in? This needs to come back. Is there something we can put in this?
What I would recommend is that we are starting the visioning process. All of the public meetings are in December. It will take us a little bit of time working with the contractor to pull the issues and opportunities report together. I would recommend that that'll give you a better snapshot of where the public is on these very issues that we're discussing today, and that when we come in with the issues and opportunities report, we can certainly take a look at how this policy is working for us. Give the board another chance to review it, maybe strengthen it if they feel that there are some gaps. So we could tie those together when we come back to the board with the report.
Okay, thank you. I came to today's meeting going to support the continuation of the moratorium. I mean, it was almost like non-negotiable for me. And really, in trying to set that aside, look at staff report, listening and remembering what happened in our last public meeting, we have a perception versus the reality. And extending the moratorium, it just sets up a perception that things are not going to happen and there's going to be sort of this slow growth and we're going to look at things. The general plan is not going to be done by the end of the year, by 2008. So I go back to why I am going to support option number 3. The general plan is a 20 to 50 year, as Mr. Selman tries to tell us, planning document. It's not a short-term document. Based on the last public meeting that we had here, and the comments that my colleagues made and the discussion of the Iwani principles, we've already started to set in place a high standard. Why I asked staff the question about the public is at the moment this is board driven based on what the community has been saying this last year and in particular in the last meeting. The fact that we've said infrastructure is critical, that we need to focus on, let's say, water and sewer, that's a big step for this board to take. Development's a discretionary measure. It's a privilege. It isn't a right that people get to develop their property. Mr. Infacino made a comment that I think we need to, as a board, be cautious about and respectful to the public, that we avoid any major alterations to communities. So, for example, one which could have been today where it was going to from rural to commercial, there was community concerned about it, and I credit the applicant for pulling the project till the general plan goes through its EIR process. I really will be challenging my colleagues to say no to projects that come before us that do not meet the criteria. We're talking 1 year, and I thought, okay, we extend the moratorium 1 year. What do we have after a year? We have the same thing that we have today. So what tools can we put in place so that we notify people when they come to us with projects that they're going to have infrastructure, they're going to have to be responsible for it. I will support item 2 on protection of on-site open space and habitat. I understand that's part of the CEQA process, but you can also have that on a 2-parcel split, a 4-parcel split. It doesn't take 200 houses for that issue to be dealt with. And of course, I'll be looking at the oak trees and the dark sky ordinance. I had to get that in. So the perception is really just that somehow we're going to be safe for a year. And the reality is we're not going to be safe in a year. We're going to be exactly where we are now. I think it's been very gracious of the public and the board to be concerned that the planning department has its hands full and they can play catch up the reality is that isn't going to happen. Commercial permits are still being issued, contrary to popular opinion. We need to have, as Steve recommends, a job housing match that's required under the general plan. What is it that we're going to gain by extending the moratorium as it's now written, the urgency ordinance, excuse me? We will be gaining nothing. By approving item 3, how we modify it to take in what Steve wants, to take out what Tom wants, to do what Russ wants, and I don't know where Bill is, I think we're much further along in the process until we can start moving with getting closer to having the general plan. Thank you.
Mr. Chair. I'd like to suggest, if there's not language from the CDA on the housing stuff, that we would add a number 4 on page 5 of the CDA's policy recommendation that would read, after number 3, utilize the voluntary implementation measures of our housing element as they pertain to reaching the county's affordable housing goals.
Could you repeat that for me, please?
Utilize the voluntary implementation measures of our housing element as they pertain to reaching the county's affordable housing goals. Page 5, new number 4 after previous number 3.
One more time, please.
Utilize the voluntary implementation measures of our housing element as they pertain to reaching the county's affordable housing goals. So we'd be asking people to take a look and make some choices.
Make choices about whether their application will be processed or not. And if you have to do that to utilize the voluntary implementation measures, then quite frankly, they're not voluntary.
Would it be possible to add the word encourage in front of the encourage utilization of?
Encourage
or
the volunteer.
would that be all right?
All right. That would be fine.
Instead of utilize.
If it gets 3
work on
votes.
semantics today.
Well,
Is that all right?
starting to get down to what tree do we say?
Okay. That's fine.
Okay. Not left for me to say as usual, which is good because I seldom have much to say. Listen, I'm a little bit confused. So first of all, a couple of housekeeping things just to get it clear in my mind. Back to number 2, there seems to be a little concern about the wording of number 2. Have we come up with the wording that we need for number 2 to eliminate?
I would like to take out cluster density with and just leave protection of on-site open space and habitat, since that's already, protection of on-site open space and habitat is already a state requirement under CEQA review.
So item number 2
want to leave that
will
in.
be
I
worded
don't
out.
think, like I say, I think this thing should list things that are discretionary to the board, not things that are just state law.
No, I understand.
It would delete the
But I
3
want to see
words
the wording.
cluster density with and start with protection of on-site
protection
open
of
space.
on-site open space and habitat. That's already required.
Okay.
And
So
you might as well take this thing and staple it to CEQA.
I got it.
Have the same
with that change and the addition of number 4,
It's not grammatically correct.
not grammatically correct. Well, we'll work on that.
Somebody state what number 4 says, the wording?
No. I mean, number 2. It starts up above by saying, now, therefore, it...
Should say protect.
Protect.
Yeah.
Protect on-site open space and habitat.
Okay, that's fine.
Okay, and I'm not trying to be picky here, but Janice, correct me if I'm wrong. If this resolution is adopted today, it takes force today. So that's why I'm trying to get this wording as close to correct as we possibly can. Are there any other issues in here with regard?
There's a couple of typos. Just to add the word and after number 1, semicolon and, because these are all ands rather than ors. And then we would also have to add the word "and" after number 3 if we're going to add a number 4.
I don't know the wording to number 4. I'd like to hear the wording to number 4.
It's encourage utilization of voluntary implementation measures of the housing element as they pertain to reaching the county's affordable housing goals.
Okay. Well, it seems to me that's an oxymoron. It can't be.
No, it may be, but it doesn't hurt anything.
That's the government's definition of voluntary.
Right.
All we're doing is encouraging. We're not actually utilizing.
I'd like to go back to number 1 and see if there's any support to increase the minimum 40-acre parcel size to something like 60.
No,
No,
not from me.
40 is fine with me.
I'm open
Steve, where are you on that?
on that.
Actually, what I'd like to do is have that come up after we listen to the public in this next round. I'm open to it, and I think that there's a real need to study what that means. I would not have the basis to know that now, but I think it should be brought up, and I think Tom raises some important issues.
We can do some analysis for you, Supervisor Tryon. We can do an analysis for you for the meeting when we come back.
You need to get a development expert in or something.
Okay.
And
say, what's the cost of doing these things, and what parcel sizes do we need, and how many parcels does it take per unit of distance to provide services, so we get something that is tied together.
Yeah, we can bring that back when we come back.
Okay, but you're going to come back to this board somewhere
No later than
somewhere
March
around
1st.
March after the Opportunities and Issues report
Yes.
is filed, and perhaps at that time we can address this issue.
Yes,
So
we
will
can,
that be
and
all
we'll
right,
provide
Bob?
some analysis.
Is that all right?
What?
So sometime around March 1st, they're going to come back with the issues and opportunities information, and we can address it at that time.
okay.
I did want to make one more clarification on the one parcel split. It is not a 40-acre minimum for that. It is any size. So
Right.
if you want to,
That's for the family
meets
split.
the existing general plan and zoning.
Correct.
Yes,
It's
but
a 40 or greater.
no,
Yeah,
on the
less than 40.
second
Family
piece, Supervisor Thomas asked about a family estate planning wanting to split off a parcel. That is not a 40-acre minimum for the one parcel split. It is.
Oh, yeah, that you have down here.
Right, it can be much
Down
smaller
the
than that,
piece.
depending on what the
Right.
designation is. Yes.
It would
But is
be,
there any chance of putting like an X designation or something that's saying that will not be split again, at least until the general plan's adopted and we have a set of
We
rules?
don't have that in our current ordinances, but what we can do is put a note on the map that it is intended to, that it is intended as part of this policy.
I think
and
we
that-
should do that. I think we
Well-
just want a whole bunch of 2x2s just screaming in.
Given Schmidt's aforementioned challenges, the idea of actually getting 2 of those done in the next year seems to defy our laws of physics.
That's why I wasn't very worried about it.
Sounds to me like a challenge.
But, yeah, it would be.
All right. Go ahead, yeah.
I want to get one clarification, please. The resolution takes effect today, but the moratorium is still in effect until December 2.
That is
And we're
correct.
going to let it run its course. So if someone wants to come in on Friday with an application, it will be denied,
Well,
and
we
they
would
can
just
do
not
it.
accept it
Not
until December
accept it?
2nd, unless
Okay.
it's already in compliance with general plan and zoning designations and is exempt from the ordinance, in which case they still could apply. But it still would be covered by the existing policies, the new policies. So there may be a couple of projects that would come in that time frame, but I don't anticipate that they would. I would anticipate they'd have to wait.
But if a project comes in before the moratorium runs its course, unless it meets the criteria for exemption, it
Will
is
be
not
under the new-
accepted.
No, it would be, unless, you're correct, unless it is exempt from the ordinance, the urgency ordinance, they will
Correct.
not be able to apply until it expires next week.
And when applications come in after December 2nd, it has to meet the criterias in the resolution.
It will be reviewed by the criteria in the resolution.
On its merits. Okay,
Yes.
thank you.
Okay? All in? Okay, folks, I am an advocate and strongly support option 3 on this agenda item, and I'm reminded, I have to remind myself sometimes, with regard to this emergency ordinance that we passed that is sometimes passed off as a moratorium, we're talking about the application process, and even every time we seem to have a public meeting regards this, we get a little bit off point, or some of the folks do, because it's just where we naturally drift to. And this is not about approving projects. And it's important that we remember that. This is about accepting applications. The approval process for these projects is a long and arduous and not always a successful path that people take. As Mr. Tanner said, there's a project over here for seniors that is, it's a great project. There's nothing I can see wrong with it, and it's not underfunded, and it's quality construction, and it's what seems to have a lot of need, and yet it's been 3 years in the process and is nowhere near completion. So the idea of rampant approval escapes me. It just does. So this is not project approval. The other thing is that, as this resolution states, this is for discretionary project applications submitted pending completion of the general plan update work program. So those, unless I misunderstand, those applications that will now be accepted are going to be evaluated based on the work plan for the new general plan. The things that you see coming to the board at this time are projects that were submitted, the applications were submitted before we started this process. And I think contrary to some opinions, significant progress has been made. The emergency ordinance was passed to give the building and planning, i.e. the CDA, the Community Development Agency, a little bit of breathing room. And that has happened. They've got breathing room. They not only have made significant progress in response to public opinion and board action and the hard work of staff, but at the same time accomplished considerable with regard to the reorganization of those departments so that this process can be more streamlined, better understood by both applicants, the county staff, and the public. So I think we've made significant progress here, and also given them the breathing room. Had we not provided the breathing room, I doubt that they would come to us with the recommendation to allow this to expire with the conditions that are placed on it. So these people will be applying to a new criteria. The concern is if people appeal, or if applications are held up and they have this appeal, they can come to the Board of Supervisors through the process. These projects go through, as we said, quite a process through the Planning Department or the CDA, from then on to the Planning Commission, and from the Planning Commission on to the Board of Supervisors. And it's been mentioned by some of my colleagues, and they're right on target here, right on the money, that it's time to hold people's feet to the fire. And that includes the developer applicant, that includes the planning commissioners, and it certainly includes the Board of Supervisors. And with all three of those entities taking into consideration the wishes of the public, I think we've got a pretty good process going on here. I really do. So I am not in favor of stopping the process. I'm in favor of improving the process, streamlining the process, and making it comply to what most people think is going to be what has been called smart growth. Moratorium is not a very healthy word, and I think we've made a lot of progress since 1 year ago today, and I applaud the CDA and the public for their input, and that concludes my comments. I am in support of option number 3. And so at this time, is there any further comment from the board? So we have the possibility of passing a resolution today.
And Mr. Chair, I'd move the resolution as amended.
One question, does that amendment include the date and the link with the public input and the revisiting of this?
Instead of incorporating that into the resolution, if you could incorporate that as part of your motion to pass the resolution and to direct staff to bring back for re-review at the time we bring the issues and opportunities report in prior to March 1st.
I'll amend the motion to reflect those statements.
Very well.
I'll second.
We have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye. Aye.
Aye. All opposed? Motion carries on a 5-0. This meeting is adjourned. Thank you all very much for attending and